forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March. For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk, and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger Ten. Here's Steve Dace.
And greetings. Welcome to a new episode of Bigger Ten. I'm Steve Dace alongside my co-host, but remember, never partner, the one and only Aaron McIntyre. Good to see you, brother. How are you?
Doing very, very well. I love this time of the year. Just go outside and get blasted by a furnace in the face. I like it. I used to not like it very much. I used to not like the extremes, but I'm digging it this year.
Give me anything other than winter, literally. So I'm good with it. Now, we don't want to wish the summer away. It technically hasn't even started yet. It kind of unofficially has post Memorial Day. But we are less than 80 days now until the beginning of the 2022 college football season. The very first game, Dublin, Ireland, your Northwestern Wildcats, Aaron, your favorite team.
Yeah.
Against your Nebraska Cornhuskers.
Other favorite team.
Your other favorite team.
Yeah.
Yes. That is the very first game. It's the Fox Big Noon Saturday game, the first one of the year, week 0 of the college football season, which means the season is just around the corner. And today is one of the most fun episodes we do on this show every single year. And it is kind of the, I guess we'll say, unofficial start of the football season when we do this episode. And this is because the college football preview mags, there's not as many of them anymore. There's only like 3 or 4. But the two main ones, Athlon's and Lindy's, and then, of course, Phil Steele's, that for a lot of people is on a level all by itself. It comes out later this month. But Athlon's, we always have an entire show dedicated to Athlon's because they give us the anonymous coaching quotes on all the Big Ten teams. What do the coaches think of their peers and their peer programs when they don't have to be accountable for their remarks? And it's always fun to go through these, Aaron, and kind of try to guess which coach might have said this or whether we agree or disagree. So this is always a lot of fun. We're going to start with the East Division in this segment, and we'll do the West Division in the next segment. You ready to go?
Absolutely.
All right, let's do these in alphabetical order, and let's begin with Indiana. Quote, "This is the season when we're all going to find out if this program can win sustainably. Tom Allen had an amazing 2020 and a weird season, but now it's a test of how good all your fundamentals as a program manager are." So this is the program that's had the most transfer portal activity in our league, both pro and con, players that have left and then players that they have brought in, including Connor Bazelak, the young man from Missouri as a quarterback who was a sensation as a freshman and a bit of a disappointment last year. And I think that's a pretty accurate summation of where the Hoosier program is right now. Tom Allen this time last year was the new hotness. And who knows? I don't think if they have another bad year, he'll be on the hot seat yet, but I wouldn't rule it out either.
No, I think it's not only accurate, I think it's a fair assessment as well. And, we'll have a couple of, this will be a little bit of a theme, live by the portal, die by the portal with some of these coach quotes. But that is true. We're going to see what the actual coaching is made of. Because when you go to the portal, it's always a little bit difficult to see how good that coach actually is, and whether or not it was just a result of the transfers in and or out. So that's a pretty good and accurate quote. I always like to try to guess who this is. My guess on this, who's saying this, my guess is Jim Harbaugh.
I was actually going to guess that too. Weird. We didn't even discuss this ahead of time.
Actually, I told you one other guy that I guessed.
Yes.
And we actually.
Yeah, I was going to guess Harbaugh as well, so that's kind of weird. All right, let's get to the next one here. As we are continuing alphabetical order in the East Division, this is on Maryland. They're going to be a must-see because you never know if they're going to score 60 and win or give up that much. Again, I think that's a pretty accurate assessment of where things stand with Maryland. And I am going to guess that Kirk Ferentz said this.
Oh, that's good. That's good, because I can hear him saying that.
Yeah, particularly off the record.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I back in the day when I did this for a living, he would say stuff like that to me off the record. Okay, so but even as he's gotten older now,
He's gotten a
lot saltier, if we're being honest, a lot
yeah.
more honest. So I could see Kirk Ferentz saying something like this.
Yeah, I was going to say James Franklin. I don't know if they
I
keep
could see
these,
that one too. Yeah.
I'm not sure if they keep these within the division or not, but that's also a fair assessment.
It's, you mean of Maryland as a program?
Yeah,
I mean, that offense they have coming back, man, with those receivers and little Tua. The offensive line is good. I mean, that offense is going to be something to have to deal with. But defensively, they've just been annihilated by departures in the portal. All right, next up, the defending champion Michigan Wolverines. Quote, "This was a changed program. They were violent on film. This was Michigan football. What you're looking for this year is how fast they resupply. You just don't replace an Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo. Was 21 the exception or the new rule?" End quote. And you and I were talking before we started taping this week's episode. We actually came to the same conclusion of who we thought said this about the Wolverines.
Yeah, that sounds, just based on one word, violent, that sounds like Pat Fitzgerald.
Yes,
to
it
me.
does.
And the rest of the quote really does too, but the violent part definitely. And I would say, I'm not sure if it's weird with Michigan. I'm not sure if this is underselling them or overselling them based on one season. Because I feel like, from what I'm hearing from Michigan's camp, this is the season that you all were expecting
Correct.
to actually take the next step forward,
Yes.
if you were going to take any steps forward or not. At the same time, I'm not sure if you want to call it a changed program necessarily after 1 year. I mean, you lived up to expectations. Well, last year the expectations were low, but for what you all recruit at and the resources you bring to the table, you live up 1 year, and it's a changed program. I'm not sure. So I'm not really sure if that's overselling or underselling.
The thing too is Michigan has the friendliest schedule in this entire conference, Aaron, and I don't even think it's close actually. If you look at Michigan's schedule, I mean it's basically one road game. Now, granted, it's one of the absolute toughest places to play in our league. That's at Kinnick, but that's really their only white jerseyed challenge before they play Ohio State at the end of the year. Michigan right now in the early game of the year lines is favored in and fairly significantly, with the exception of that road game against Iowa, in their first 11 games. And then, of course, they're, I think, about a 10-point underdog, I think last I saw, against Ohio State at the end of the year. So this could be a team that maybe doesn't sustain all the way that new culture we saw last year, and still just goes 10-2 because they out-talent almost everybody and plays an in-year Six Bowl and looks more like a typical Harbaugh year, because because this was the year. This is why Harbaugh and the assistants were given 2-year contracts in 2020, because the expectation actually was that this was the season that they were going to take a step forward. And if you look at Michigan's roster the next couple of years, it's actually pretty loaded. They've had really good recruiting classes, and they've retained those guys. They didn't retain those guys early in Harbaugh's tenure.
Yeah, no. So I think this is, again, if you put a gun to my head, I would say this is a fair assessment, but it's just going to need a larger sample size to know for sure whether or not this entire program has turned around.
And you wonder culturally, how does a program respond when your coach says right after the season, hey, I'd rather coach Kirk Cousins than J.J. McCarthy, right? So we'll see how that goes too. All right, next up, obviously, if we're doing this alphabetical order, is Michigan State. Quote, "There are two big questions. How do you maintain your culture and momentum when you live and die in the portal as much as these guys have? And how's life after Kenneth Walker? That guy was a legit difference maker." End quote. This sounds like it could be James Franklin too, by the way. But what do you think?
I think it's PJ Fleck. Based on the word
as well.
Legit there. I think, although I do think James Franklin, I think that sounds like PJ Fleck to me. And that's a really...
Would it shock you if they were all James Franklin? Everybody but Penn State was James Franklin?
No,
it wouldn't.
Actually, that would be really cool if Athlon,
that would be funny as hell,
was just one coach every single year.
Right.
Yeah, no, that would be hilarious. So I think this is also a pretty accurate assessment as well, because we don't know, kind of like I was saying before with Tom Allen at Indiana, what we're going to be seeing this year with Michigan State. Is it the coaching? Is that really what's going on up there, or is it just kind of the influx or outflow of talent, I think that's a pretty obvious but still accurate assessment.
I'll say this as a Michigan fan: if they keep recruiting like they're off to the recruiting start they are for this next class, they won't be hitting the transfer portal as much as they were, brother. Okay, so I'm not really happy to see that right now. All right, let's go up next to the Ohio State University. Quote: "The sole issue that kept them out of the playoff has been fixed. It's all about how new defensive coordinator Jim Knowles gets them fit for what he wants. How quick new defensive coordinator Jim Knowles gets them fit for what he wants. If you're looking for a criticism here, they're short on superstars on defense lately." Unquote. I'm going to say this is Scott Frost, because he's played Ohio State a couple of times. Isn't like his best win at Nebraska a loss to Ohio State a few years ago?
Yeah.
Where they've actually played them pretty tough a couple of times, right? So I'm going to say that this one is Scott Frost at Nebraska.
That's a pretty good call. I was going to say, who's the Maryland coach? I'm having a brain
Mike
fart here.
Loxley?
Loxley.
Yeah.
I was going to say this sounds a little bit like Loxley, but I don't know. That's just my gut reaction. And it's true.
I can see it being Schiano, too.
Oh, that's true.
As an Ohio State guy and a former defensive coordinator there, I could see that being him, too.
Yeah. Actually, that's probably who it is. But it's an accurate statement, too. I just remember, I think it was Tulsa, Ohio State was playing last year. Tulsa or Tulane, I believe it was Tulsa. And, I mean, it's Tulsa, man. It's Tulsa. They shouldn't be running up and down on you on defense, and yet that seemed to be what was happening. So hopefully just bringing in a defensive coordinator, you don't have to be the steel curtain. You just need to be able to stop them a few more times, the other offense, a few more times when it matters, than they are able to score on you, because you've got so much margin for error with that offense.
Quietly, this is already the fourth defensive coordinator for Ryan Day.
Yikes.
The fourth, heading into his fourth year. Speaking of James Franklin, these quotes probably aren't his. Penn State, quote, "You would think this is a really hungry team and staff given the way they've fallen off the last few years. Having an experienced passer and not installing a new system on offense is a huge win for them. This could be a bounce back season," unquote. So I know there were games last year that Sean Clifford was just, primordial ooze. Like the bowl game, for example. He was terrible in that bowl game. But for the year, a 21-7 touchdown interception ratio, man. That's pretty good. Particularly in our league, that's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
We're not the most passing league out there. Defensively, they do lose quite a bit. You saw a lot of those guys picked in the NFL draft. They've got to replace. One of the great mysteries that we talked about all last year, Aaron, was all those 4- and 5-star tailbacks, man, and they could not muster any semblance of a running game all season long. Even when they got off to a great start, we forget this was the number 5 team in the country when they went to play your Hawkeyes in Iowa City midway through the year, right? And then they fell off the map. They're 11-11 the last 2 years. So what do you think about that quote? You think it's correct? They could be due for a breakout season? What do you think it was?
I'm going to need to see a little bit more from Penn State. They're kind of in Michigan territory to me. Michigan meaning, you've got the resources, and they don't recruit quite at the level, but pretty close to the level that Michigan recruits. There's no excuse for any program of that standing that has that resources and is able to bring in guys like they are able to not perform and not be competitive. The only excuse I can have that I can see is you're in a division with Michigan and Ohio State, but we're not seeing them go 10-2 every year, are we? No. They're being upset by teams they should not be upset by. So I don't think they're poised to have a breakout season. To me, this sounds a little like this one is the one I was going to say was Schiano, actually.
So 3 out of the 4 years prior to these last two, Penn State won 11 games or more. Then they go 11-11. And so you mentioned recruiting. Michigan clearly was recruiting better than them. Now, the last 2 years, last year they had a better class. They're definitely off to a better start this year. There is kind of a sense with Penn State, like we were talking with Michigan last year, that the best talent in the program is in the freshman and sophomore classes. Can they just win enough games this year
keep those guys around.
To keep those guys around, not lose that momentum, get to a guy like a Drew Aller, who was the top pro-style quarterback in the country last year, who's kind of sitting there behind Sean Clifford waiting in the wings. And so that's what you're kind of hoping for if you're a Penn State fan. You want to see 8 to 9 wins this year, get to those kinds of numbers, show the thing is on the right track, and let this be kind of a bridge season to where your real talent lies in the younger two classes. Let's finish out the East with Rutgers. Quote, "There's a talent gap on film, but they're really physical and they do a good job with their technique. It really comes down to long-term expectations. No one in the league doubts what they're doing. It's just a matter of what their ceiling will be."
Yep.
I thought this might have been Ryan Day.
No way. That's who I was going to say.
Is that who you were going to guess?
Yeah. No, that's
okay.
Because
it just sounds like Ryan Day at his press
kind of
conference. Very boilerplate, but also very analytical at the exact same time. Yeah.
Correct. So yeah, that's who I was going to say. So that's 3 of them so far.
That's weird.
So that must be if 2 of us not having compared notes before, if 2 of us come up, that must be really who it is. That's what I'm telling myself. But that's a pretty good assessment of Rutgers. It is, Schiano's already won there. Seems to be doing things the right way. And so it's just a matter of what their ceiling will be. And it's, a bowl game, that's a pretty high ceiling compared to what Rutgers was and the company they were keeping in the cellar of Power 5 football. So right now, in the next few years, I'd say, that ceiling is probably a bowl game. But beyond that, I don't think they can get a whole heck of a lot higher than that consistently.
All right, so there are the anonymous coach quotes for 22 for the East Division. When we come back, let's take a look at the West. All right, back here on Bigger 10, one of our favorite episodes of the year. We break down the anonymous coach quotes in the Athlon's college football preview. We just went through the East, Aaron. Let us now alphabetically go through the West. And we begin with the Fighting Illini. Quote, "It's going to be interesting this year because they had a lot of roster guys using that extra COVID year last season, maybe the most in our conference. That gave them a lot of veteran presence. They have to find a quarterback going into camp, and the defense has to take that next step up." End quote.
That's a lot. That's a mouthful right there. Interesting, I think, is probably going to be a good word for the Illini this year, because we, as was just pointed out there, they have some deficiencies, but they have some, I guess we'll say, curiosities as well. I don't have super high expectations, nor does anyone, for the Illini, but they have a legit coach now. Not to take anything away from Lovey, but he
was not a legit college coach.
But yeah,
just the work that was needed to run a program.
He was not prepared to do.
He was just not.
No.
I agree.
He was a good guy, good dude. It seemed like the players.
He's a hell of an NFL defensive coordinator.
Exactly. But they have a legit college coach, as you just pointed out, in Brett Bielema. So there's always going to be a little bit of intrigue surrounding this. To me, this sounds like. I've been keeping track of the coaches that I said.
I was going to say Fleck or Brom.
I was going to say Tom Allen for this one.
I could see Tom Allen too.
I think Brom though. That's a pretty good call.
I could see it being Tom Allen as well. All right, we've got next your Iowa Hawkeyes. Quote, "They do what they do it well, and they do not care if you think they should do it different." This is Brett Bielema. I'm just telling you.
Yep.
They're a model of defense. The issue is going to be production at the quarterback position. This program is the definition of overachieving in the sport. End quote. Now that last quote though, I could see that being Jim Harbaugh right there. That last quote.
That's true.
But the first part is if I'm as confident of anything, if there, maybe these are all assistant coaches, I don't know, but if there's any head coach that made a comment, it is the former Hawkeye Brett Bielema saying that about Iowa, and that even sounds like Brett Bielema.
Yep.
That is Brett Bielema right there.
That's who I was going to say as well. And if I were whoever puts this together for Athlon's,
tremendous idea, by the way.
It is.
It's a great idea.
It is. If I were any Big Ten coach and I get the call from whoever puts this together for Athlon's, whenever I pick up the phone, hey, we're doing anonymous coach quotes again, I'm thinking, please don't tell me it's Iowa. please don't let it be Iowa, because it's just the same thing every single year. How can I say the same thing?
Right.
15 different times.
Bert's got the swag to say something like that.
Yeah.
He says the same thing he could say every year, but he said it the Bert way.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay, we go next to Minnesota. Quote, they lose a lot on that offensive line, so that's going to be something to keep an eye on. The defensive line will probably take a step back too, since they're losing NFL talent there. If Kirk Shiraka and Tanner Morgan can click again, they could have another special year, end quote. All the focus on line play there, I'm going to say Kirk Ferentz or Paul Chryst would be my guess.
Yeah, I think it's Ferentz, although the Chryst could be a good one as well. I think this definitely comes from within the division for sure, because there seems to be an intimate knowledge of Minnesota.
Right. For those that don't know, Kirk Shiraka was the OC when Tanner Morgan had the fourth best passer rating in Big Ten history. Then he got hired away after Morgan had that great game against Penn State. He got hired away by James Franklin. It never clicked there. He's back at Minnesota now.
Yeah.
So
doesn't seem to be as high on Minnesota, whoever this is, as you are, right?
Yeah.
This year?
Yeah. I mean, I agree they've lost some guys on the line, but they also have the most fifth-year senior roster points in our league. And I can't think of a time that did not foretell a good season for a team. A couple times that's been Northwestern when they've gone to the Big Ten championship game, for example. Okay. Speaking of teams that start with the letter N, let's go to Nebraska. Quote, we call it the I love this. We call it the all-bus team because they look better than anyone else in the West in pregame. We ask ourselves a lot about what's going on there because they're pulling in good talent and have the resources. They're talented enough, but is there some kind of mental block there? To me, I think this might be Brett Bielema too, or James Franklin. I could see that being either one, the all-bus team. But what do you think?
I think this is Mel Tucker.
I could see that too.
I think this is Mel Tucker.
I just don't know have they played Nebraska yet since he's been there?
Yeah, that was really exciting game last year. I think this is Mel.
That's right. It was a night game. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is Mel Tucker. And I haven't really watched them get off all I see is them collapsing in the first. That's all I can get past with Nebraska. So I don't really know if this is true or not, or an accurate statement or not, except for the last part, the mental block. Yeah. There is a mental block. There's a mental block there for sure.
I believe they have the most one-score losses in a 4-year period.
Yep.
In modern college football history. That has to be a mental block.
Yeah.
You figure you just get lucky a few times, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's go to Northwestern. Quote on the Wildcats, there's no consistency with the running back and quarterback, and they're not talented enough at receiver. They're drawing a pretty nasty schedule. Finding an established starter at quarterback could get them to 500, and that would be a huge success towards the future, unquote. I could see this being all kinds of people, so I wasn't even sure who to guess. What do you think?
Yeah, I was going to say either Brom or Chris, but I think it's Brom with the focus on the quarterback.
There you go. That's good. Yeah.
And it is true, but you can't just discount Pat Fitzgerald. Can't just discount Pat Fitzgerald. As much as it pains me to say it, it's true. Everything in that is true. No consistency, running back, quarterback. At the same time, though, if you're a plotting team, or if you're a team with any sort of vulnerability on the line, he's going to exploit that. He's going to exploit that. So you always got to pay attention. So I think that's a pretty accurate statement.
Okay. We have next Purdue. Quote, most of their offense is coming back and they're clicking. On defense, it hinges on how the front seven holds up. Can they stop the run? Losing a guy like George Karlaftis is insane. I'm not sure they have another one like that, end quote. So focus on the offense is clicking, but look what we're doing or what's happening on defense. And George Karlaftis was kind of a one-man wrecking ball. Could this be Kirk Ferentz too?
It could be. Yeah, it could be.
You know what? I'm going to say it's Pat Fitzgerald.
Okay. Yeah.
Were you going to say Fleck?
Yeah, it could be Fleck as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think this. For me, it could be Fleck, but for me, I think it's Chryst since I've already used Fleck. This is Paul Chryst. The focus on the defensive side of the ball and stopping the run. I just think, dude, Purdue poached not one, but 2 Iowa wide receivers. And 2 good, pretty good, talented. They just weren't utilized because it's Iowa.
If you want to see how they can catch the ball in a black and gold uniform, you'll get a shot this fall.
Thank you. Thank you. Keep on the sunny side. Always on the sunny side. Keep on the sunny side of life. Appreciate that. No, I think this is fairly accurate, but they're going to be just fine on offense. I think they're going to be just fine on offense again. We'll see if the what do they have? Defensive coordinators, 3 different.
Just 2 of them now. One of them got his own job. Just 2 of them now. One of them, the guy who's actually going to be calling the plays, is former Michigan defensive coordinator Ron English from the end of the Lloyd Carr era. By the way. Yeah.
Well, yeah. On a side note, though, I can't wait to see how George Karlaftis plays for the Chiefs. That's going to be exciting.
That quote, though. I mean, they bring everybody but David Bell back, and I know that's like saying, well, that's like bringing everybody but Jordan back.
Yeah.
But keep in mind they didn't have Bell in that bowl game against Tennessee, man, and they were moving the ball up and down the field still. But even though they have a great legacy of edge guys at Purdue, Karlaftis, the way he played both ways, the run and the getting after the quarterback, they just don't get a lot of guys like that there. I do think having to replace him is a far bigger deal. As much as I love David Bell, I think that's a far bigger deal than having to replace David Bell. Okay, where are we going next? Final one. Wisconsin. Quote, unless they hit on some transfers, I don't really know if they have a go-to option at wide receiver or tight end right now. And yeah, they have this very specific offensive identity, but you can get stale. Their red zone execution really suffered last year because they were so easy to predict, unquote. So this is somebody that played them last year, and I'm going to guess somebody that beat them last year. I can't see this being Harbaugh because he just doesn't talk like this, okay? So who else beat them? Minnesota beat them last year.
Yep.
Could it be Fleck again? Okay. So I would start looking at who beat them last year or who almost beat them last year.
Did Penn State beat them last year? Yeah, Penn State beat them last year.
Did they? I have to go back and look. I don't remember.
Yeah, they did. First week of the year.
You're right. Very first week. There you go. And so, yeah, could I see this being James Franklin? You bet I could. I could see it being James Franklin.
The only coach I have left, and I can kind of hear his voice saying this, is Scott Frost.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of projection there at the end, which is kind of on brand for Scott Frost.
Yes, a whole lot of projection is on brand for Scott Frost.
Yes. Yeah, so I don't really necessarily agree with this assessment either, because last year, I mean, they showed they could win, and they could win in their own style with the couple of I think it was Malusi and whatever the name of the other back was. They can still win even with half a quarterback behind center. So I'm not really sure I agree with that.
I will say I don't remember the last time Wisconsin lost this many guys on defense, though. Even for Wisconsin, this is a lot to reload on the defensive side of the ball for sure. All right, we'll come back and we'll wrap things up with our Twitter poll results and our feedback of the week next. This week's Twitter poll results, we asked you which Big Ten football team is most likely to go over its low win total in 2022. So these are the 4 lowest season win totals in the Big Ten. All right. Illinois at 4, Indiana at 3.5, Northwestern at 3.5, Rutgers at 4.5. Northwestern going over 3.5 won this barely, 35% over the 31% for Illinois going over the 4. My pick, in fact, one of my season win total best bets of the year is Indiana over 3.5. That came in next at 17.4%, and then Rutgers going over the 4.5 barely showed up there in the rear. Your thoughts on these results, Aaron?
Yeah, I think it's a fairly decent pick, not a lock, but I think it's a decent pick because you always want when you're talking about low win totals, which teams can at least hold their own on defense. And Northwestern has proven that they can, because if you can't hold your own on defense, it doesn't matter how trashy or how flashy your offense is. You're going to have a hard time pulling through games or pulling out games at the end. So I think it's a fairly safe pick.
By the way, for our next episode in a couple of weeks, the Twitter poll question will be, which of these 4 Big Ten teams is most likely to go under its season win total? And we're going to take the 4 highest win totals in the league. So that'll be the Twitter poll here in a couple of weeks. Let's get to our feedback of the week. In fact, it's from ourselves. So I thought we'd have some fun with this. In anticipation, and Joel Klatt, who of course is basically the voice of college football for Fox Sports, which is the Big Ten's big media partner, he said on the Andy Staples podcast this week that the Big Ten will, quote, absolutely be getting rid of divisions, unquote. So we all anticipate this, and you would think Klatt would know, being the face of the TV partner for our league, right? Okay. So along those lines, if we went to a 3+6 schedule, 3 protected rivalries per year, you're going to play the same 3 teams every year, and then it rotates the other 6 so that you're playing everybody within a 4-year span. That's how this would work, okay? I was playing around with what I thought the protected rivalries would be for every team. And so here's what I came up with. For Illinois, Northwestern, Ohio State, and Purdue, and for those of you who want to know, my number one priority was protecting as many traditional rivalries in the league as possible, and then competitive balance from there. Okay, so Illinois gets Northwestern, Ohio State, and Purdue. Indiana gets Michigan State, Northwestern, and Purdue. Iowa gets Minnesota, Nebraska, Wisconsin. Maryland gets Northwestern, Penn State, so we have that East Coast flavor there with Rutgers as well. Michigan gets Michigan State, Ohio State, and then Rutgers. Michigan State gets Indiana, Michigan, and Penn State. Minnesota gets Iowa, Nebraska, and Wisconsin. Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin. Northwestern, Illinois, Indiana, Maryland. Ohio State, Illinois, Michigan, Penn State. Penn State gets Maryland, Michigan State, and Ohio State. Purdue gets Illinois, Indiana, and Rutgers. Rutgers gets Maryland, Michigan, and Purdue. And then Wisconsin gets Iowa, Minnesota, Nebraska. Do you like what I came up with here? Is there anything you really have a bone of contention with?
No, not really. I think that's going to be the route that they go, because I would rather do just rivalries that actually already existed. If that means 3 for some, with a maximum of like 3. If that means 3 for some teams and 0 for other teams, I'm good with that. From a scheduling standpoint, though, that's going to be like almost impossible to pull off. So I understand going to the 3+6 or 3+5, whatever it ends up being. I'd say the weakest looking division just that jumps out at me is, or the not division, but pod or rivalry matchup would be Indiana's. Michigan State, Northwestern, Purdue, although Michigan State in the last decade and a half has been very formidable. But what I like about this is that it seems like with each of these potential matchups, there are 3 teams there that are, you could see them being competitive, and then there's one that has been historically, at least recent history in the last 10 to 20 years, been very, very good. And I think that achieves competitive balance. So I don't really have a huge bone to pick with any of these. Specifically speaking, as an Iowa fan, yep, that's fine. As long as we get to play Wisconsin and especially Minnesota, and if you want to throw in Nebraska there, I think most Iowa fans would be happy with that.
All right, good stuff. That'll do it for this week's episode of Bigger 10. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Bigger 10. Just that simple. Keep up to date on what we think all things Big 10 between now and our next episode. By the way, Big 10 Media Days were just announced July 26th and 27th in Indianapolis. So we're barely over a month away from that, if you can believe it. All right. Don't forget, you can also like, rate, subscribe, share, 5-star review, follow, whichever applies, however you watch, like right here on YouTube, or listen, like right here on iTunes or Google Play or Stitcher. Please keep doing that so we can find more Big Ten sports fans just like you. Until the next time, for Aaron McIntyre, I'm Steve Deace. We'll see you again right here on Bigger 10.